Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking through Mistborn, the Final Empire, and whether or not this has helped change my perspective or shift my thinking about my approach to Brandon Sanderson. As you may know, I am the last booktuber on earth to read Mistborn. For reasons that I will explain, I have not yet read the Mistborn trilogy, but I tried to remedy that this month and started off with the very first book, The Final Empire. So, to give a little bit of background about my history with Mistborn, I am not very well versed in Brandon Sanderson's work. I read one of his young adult novels, Steelheart, about 10-ish years ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I feel like it was somewhere around 2012 because I know that I was in medical school at the time that I read it. And it was fine. It was okay. I didn't continue on with the series when I was reading that. But I had heard while I was at Comic-Con, a lot of people talk about Brandon Sanderson. And so I decided that I would buy his most popular series for my dad for Christmas. So I bought my dad the Mistborn trilogy. He read it, and he has not read a lot of modern fantasy, much like myself. And he really, really loved it. So he said, yes, you should definitely read this. I think that it's great. You should read it right away. And then over the years between then and now, I have tried to read Mistborn several times. Now, I wouldn't necessarily qualify or classify what I did as a DNF because in all honesty, I picked up the book, I read like one or two pages, felt like either the beginning or the writing style or whatever didn't really click with me at the time. And so then I didn't end up continuing on. But I wouldn't say that I picked it up and like read it and disliked it and thought, okay, I'm going to DNF this series. It was more, I just wasn't in the mood to read it. And so I didn't. And then when I first started watching BookTube, I was trying to get some advice on where to start with Brandon Sanderson. And people gave me all kinds of different answers, but I had decided that if I was going to attempt to read the Cosmere, that I would start with the book Warbreaker, because that was a standalone novel, and I felt like maybe it would give me a good look at his writing style and the types of stories that he put together. And Warbreaker was absolutely fine. I liked it. It incorporated some of the things that are, I think, really big draws for some fantasy fans, like the highly detailed magic system, like the intricate plotting, but not necessarily the things that I look for when I read fantasy. So even though I read Warbreaker, I enjoyed it. I think I even gave it 5 stars. I think that the famous kind of Sanderlanche ending really got me. And I find that that happens a lot. If I'm reading a book and the ending really hooks me in, I will end up probably rating it higher than I would when I look back in reflection. So I liked Warbreaker, but it didn't make me really want to pick up more of Sanderson's work immediately. And that has kind of summed up my approach to Brandon Sanderson so far. I am not uninterested in his work. I recognize that his books, and particularly the Stormlight Archive, are some of people's favorite fantasy series of all time. So many people have so much praise for this series, so I know that it's something that I want to read, but I just have never felt that pull or that hook to get into his work immediately, despite the fact that he is so well known. And I would like to point out that this has like nothing to do with being like a pseudo book hipster or whatever you would call that, because I actually really love reading popular things. If there are things that everybody's reading and not me, then I really dislike that. That is what has led me to such terrible decisions as reading the first 50 Shades of Grey book, because when everyone is talking about a series, I want to talk about it too. I want to know why people like it or why they dislike it or what there is to say about it. So despite the fact that so many people love Brandon Sanderson, there were elements about his books that were just not immediately hooking me in. But I decided that this was going to be the year that I started Mistborn, and I thought, what better way to give myself some accountability than to create a buddy read to read this. So I set up a buddy read on the Discord server. There were a group of us, some of us reading it for the first time, some people who really loved it, who were rereading it along with us, and some people who just jumped in the chat to send me smiling gifs and little read and find out emojis so that every time I had a theory or a question, they would just pop in with those helpful suggestions. So that is how the read along went. It was a lot of fun, and it did motivate me to read and to read at the same pace that kind of everybody else was doing. So I got through the book this week and I ended up really enjoying it. Did it convert me? That's the big question, I guess. Like, did reading Mistborn the Final Empire turn me into a Sander fan? Am I someone who now rabidly is waiting to read all of his books? I don't think so, but that being said, I did really enjoy it. I think that I was doing myself a disservice by discontinuing it so early, those previous times that I had tried it. And there were elements of this that I really, really enjoyed. I think overall, what probably will continue to be my difficulty with Sanderson moving forward is that some of the things that I really like about fantasy are not things that he cares to incorporate in his books. And some of the things that I am either lukewarm on or just generally apathetic about are the things that he does really, really well. So I can recognize why Brandon Sanderson would be people's favorite fantasy author of all time. But I think I can say with some confidence that he will not end up being one of my favorite authors of all time. That being said, I am very much looking forward to finishing Mistborn, and I am very much looking forward to diving into the deeper Cosmere. So just to, I guess, give a little review of Mistborn, because I still think, despite the fact that literally everybody has reviewed this book, I would like to talk about some of the things that I liked or disliked, and then maybe hear from people who are big Brandon Sanderson fans, who can let me in on whether or not they think that these elements improve, or if they're just things that don't hold as much focus in future books. So regarding the plot, for anyone who does not know, Mistborn it opens up like a typical heist story. We have two main protagonists the story focuses on, and those are the characters of Kelsier and Vin. Kelsier and Vin are both Ska, or members of the impoverished caste in the society in which they live. And they both live kind of on the fringes of society. So in general, the Ska work on plantations, and they are belittled, they are abused, they are completely worked to the bone. And there are very few opportunities, even very few criminal opportunities, for them to expand their horizons or live a different kind of life. But our two main characters are Ska, or members of this populace, who have managed to eke out an existence kind of on those fringes of society. So we have Kelsier, who is known as one of the most famous Ska leaders of a thieving guild. And then we have Vin, who is a street urchin, who has grown up on the streets, and she is in a thieving guild of much lower status. So at the beginning of the novel, we see Kelsier putting together a crew to pull off what he hopes is going to be one of his biggest heists or one of his biggest jobs ever. One of the members of his crew has taken notice of Vin through some of her criminal activities, and she is approached by Kelsier, and she is told by Kelsier that she actually has this untapped potential that she knows nothing about. So unbeknownst to her, Vin has been living her life and utilizing very small amounts of the central magical system that's in this book. And that magical system is called allomancy. So allomancy gives people the ability to ingest and then manipulate the magical properties of various metals, which Vin has been doing unconsciously. So she's been using the very trace amounts of metals that are found within her bloodstream, within her body, in the water that she drinks, and using this power in very small amounts, which has made her feel like she can manipulate luck. But what she's really doing is using this magic system. And what Kelsier lets her know is that not only can Vin use this magic, which is very rare in and of itself, but she is what is known as a Mistborn, or someone who can manipulate all of the various types of metals. And so he tries to recruit her to his cause so that she can take part in this grand plan and use her prodigious powers for good. And so this becomes kind of part heist story, part uprising against the evil empire, the leader of which is a man, or maybe not a man, we don't know, called the Lord Ruler. And he is this incredibly powerful I would say cruel, but in an apathetic sort of way, ruler. And so he is the person who takes charge over the land, and it is because of him that the Ska have such a terrible lot in life. So Vin agrees to join Kelsier, and from there she becomes part of this thieving crew, which is very different from anything that she has ever known. So it is a very interesting setup. I will say that while heists are not my favorite, I don't mind heist stories, but I don't go out of my way to seek them. I do like this kind of rising up against your oppressor. I like that trope. And I really like the kind of street urchin discovering that they have magical powers trope. So there are a couple of things that automatically made me feel like I was going to like Mistborn going into it. Because the plot is so focused on the magic system, I will talk a little bit about world building next. And I think this is where I see Brandon Sanderson shine. And this is where kind of everybody acknowledges is his greatest strength in fantasy. Brandon Sanderson has an amazing imagination, his magic systems, but also the world that he builds up around them, from the politics to the religion to the lore to the history. Everything flows together really seamlessly, and despite the fact that there was an incredible amount of world building in Mistborn, I didn't ever feel like it was info dumpy, that I was just getting these like huge buckets of information poured over me in a really clunky or inelegant way. I thought that things unfolded very naturally, and that we got to see this world and discover this world through the eyes of our characters. So we got to discover things about the world through Kelsier, and especially through Vin, who's experiencing a lot of things for the very first time in this story. But I also think that he just threads parts of the narrative together very well. He does use epigraphs at the beginning of every chapter. And these are, at the beginning of the story, you're not really sure who is narrating this. This becomes clearer and clearer as the book goes on, but they are very interesting. Now, something that someone told me in the buddy read group on Discord is that some people skip these epigraphs, which blows my mind. I don't skip anything when I'm reading. I am someone who likes to read the poems, the songs, the footnotes. Whatever is in there, I am going to want to read it. But these epigraphs are really interesting, and they actually provide a lot of information about the story and kind of help you solve some of the central mysteries. So please let me know if you're one of the people who skip this, because I would like to understand the thought process behind that, because I thought that they enriched the story, they enriched the world, and they were just fascinating to read about. But the world building, very well done. The setup of this world is that they live in this environment that is completely overcome by ash. So there's essentially these volcanoes that spew out ash, and the whole world is gray. So Vin does not know what it is like or what it even means for a world to be green, for there to be flowers. She hears descriptions of these things from Kelsier for the first time, and while he's talking about how beautiful the world must have been, she's just kind of like, why do you think, like, why does it matter if things are green? Like, why would I want to see a flower with bright colors? Like, that'd be so strange. So I thought that was an interesting perspective, because us as the readers, we obviously, or I think the vast majority of us probably think that these lush green fields and beautiful flowers, we can recognize the beauty in that. But it is such an alien concept to Vin. Oh gosh, now I'm calling her Vin, that she doesn't even recognize that that's something that she's supposed to find beautiful. I hope I haven't been calling Vin Rin this whole time, but if I have, then feel free to make fun of me in the comments. But yes, the world building, it is this gray, dreary kind of land, and that really, I think, offers a window into the mental state of a lot of these people, a lot of these overworked Ska. They are downtrodden. They are not allowed to have any joy in life. They are kind of cut off from all of life's pleasures. And the setting really amplifies that feeling. When you start this book, you can just feel the oppression kind of weighing down on you. You know this is not a happy world. And the picture that Brandon Sanderson paints goes along with that very well. One thing that I struggled with a little bit was the writing style here. And I think that because Brandon Sanderson is able to paint a picture so well with his descriptions, and because he has such intricate world building, and he obviously has such a very clear idea of what this world looks like, what its history is, I don't think that he requires to have overly beautiful or flowery or immersive prose. And so this is 100% a personal preference. I like fantasy books with beautiful prose. I think that it fits when I think of fantasy, I think of something magical. When I think of something magical, I think of beautiful writing. I love beautiful writing. It is not by any means a requirement. I can find lots of things to like about a book, but it is something that I did not enjoy about this book as much. I don't know how much that is going to change, but Brandon Sanderson's prose is very much utilitarian. It gets the job done. It tells the story, and the story is clearly what is important to him. The means through which the story is communicated, I think, falls way to the back, but I think that's the way that Brandon Sanderson wanted it. I don't think he's someone who's kind of striving or wishing or hoping that he could just write like Robin Hobb. Like, I think that he recognizes the things that he is good at, and he works really hard to make sure that those are done well. So in terms of personal preference, I did find the prose to be a little bit clunky, and it did take me some time to acclimate. I think once I got used to it, it was much easier to read through more quickly. But I did find it very clunky at the beginning, and that's probably what held me back all those other times when I was trying to read it. Similarly, the dialogue, and I did find this in Warbreaker as well. So if you are a big Brandon Sanderson fan, if you are widely read in Sanderson, can you tell me if the dialogue improves? Maybe you liked the dialogue and you're gonna yell at me. I'm not sure, but I found the dialogue so clunky. There were tons of times where even, recognizing that this is a fantasy world, recognizing this is a very impassioned group of people, I found myself often thinking, people don't say things like that, or people don't talk like that. Did you do the read aloud test, Brandon Sanderson? Did you read these tags of dialogue out loud and see if they flowed naturally? Because for me, I found that they very much did not. And sometimes it kind of borders on cheesy, which is something that I have heard may come up again in the future for Brandon Sanderson's work. So please let me know if you agree or disagree with that. From there, we can talk a little bit about the characters. That's kind of the last main piece that I want to cover here. And this is somewhere where I find myself very conflicted in terms of Mistborn, and I wonder if I'm going to have the same level of conflict with Brandon Sanderson in general, because I have heard, just by existing on BookTube, that characters from Stormlight like Kaladin or Dalinar are some of people's favorite fantasy characters ever. And when we're in a group of people that reads a lot of fantasy, so when many people say that, then I take it as fact that Brandon Sanderson must be someone who knows how to craft very well-drawn characters. But unfortunately for me, in Mistborn, I didn't find myself overly attached to or overly compelled by any of the characters. And to me, they felt like they had the makings of interesting characters. So clearly Brandon Sanderson had plotted these characters out. He had built them up. He has a very good command of who they are and what their reactions are going to be and how they're going to act in certain situations. But there was some sort of spark missing. And I don't know if that is something personal or if other people also feel this way about Mistborn or feel this way about Brandon Sanderson, and it's just, you're going to be on one side or the other. So I'm very interested to know from people who are longtime fans or people who just like the books and have read them all. Do you think that his character work gets better with time, or do you think that this is just a personal thing? Because I think that Kelsier and Vin, they're very complex individuals. We have Vin, who has been through an incredibly traumatic upbringing. She has had no source of stable attachment. Her biggest attachment figure in childhood was her brother, who mistreated her in the extreme, physically, mentally, verbally abused her, but also was the person to look out for her, to make sure that she was taken in on thieving crews, to give her, from his perspective, the best advice that he felt like he had to offer. And this kind of yo-yoing of, is this affection or is this mistreatment, has given Vin not only a very unstable sense of self, she has a very little command over who she is as a person, what her personality is, what she wishes for, what she wants to accomplish, but has also made her, by turns, very scared and very quick to anger or paranoia, which is something that we see often in people who have been abused over the course of their lifetime. They have very little to hold on to anchor themselves with. And so you do get these very wildly swinging emotions. You get people who are very protective of themselves and want to keep themselves safe. And that can lead to pushing other people away or a reluctance to get close to other people. and then an immense amount of guilt when you do that pushing away. It's kind of like, I hate you, don't leave me. You know, I don't want you here, but please don't go. And we see a lot of that push and pull with Vin, which I thought was really realistic. And I did really like that about her character. I felt like the way that she reacted in situations as she was being brought into a group of people who genuinely care about each other, she had a lot of difficulty with that. She doesn't know how to care about people. She doesn't know how to let herself be cared for. And I thought that Brandon Sanderson did a great job of that. Similarly, we have Kelsier, who has gone from, and this is pre the book starting, so this is not a spoiler, but he has gone from someone who wants to make a name for himself to somebody who wants to fight for a cause and fight for something. And the way that that transition happens and the way that he presents himself to his friends versus the nobility versus the ska, you can see all of those elements of his personality come together. So I think that these are really strong character skeletons, but there was just something that kept me from feeling really close to them. And this is something nebulous and that I'm not sure how to describe. I just know when I read it and when I feel like it's done well. But here, there was something that held me back. There was a barrier that kept these from feeling like fully realized characters for me. And that meant that for me, the emotional stakes were lower. When big things happen in the book, there's not as much of an emotional response as there would be otherwise. And I definitely felt that in this book. There were some moments, there were some events that I think should have resonated with me more strongly. And the fact that they didn't meant that I know I was not connecting to the characters in a way that I would have preferred. But regardless of that, regardless of the fact that prose and characters are my favorite things about fantasy novels, I still really ended up enjoying this. I feel like it was a 4-star read for me throughout the majority of the book. And then I fell victim once again to the Sanderlanche. Those last 100 pages of Mistborn were phenomenal. The way that all of the plot threads come together, the kind of breakneck action that's happening, the highs and the lows, you just have to keep reading. And I unfortunately arrived at that kind of last 100-page mark around midnight. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just finish this chapter and then I'll go to bed. But no. That did not happen. I was up for like another hour reading through those 100 pages, trying to get through it as quickly as I possibly could, and I could not put it down. So I had to keep reading, and I think that that is probably what makes Sanderson so compelling, especially for people who are new to fantasy, because it's so exciting. The end of this book is so exciting. I felt the same way when I read Warbreaker. I can remember feeling like, this is not too fast paced, but then I got to the end, I was like, whoa, I really need to keep reading. So I definitely really enjoyed the ending, and it did make me want to continue along with this series very quickly. I will say that some of the plot threads that I was most interested in were closed at the beginning of the first book. So if there were certain things that had not been resolved, I would have literally picked up the second book right away. But I think it gives you enough of a place to pause that it's okay to take a little bit of a break. And I will likely go back to book 2 in December because I do want to read them pretty quickly and I do want to be able to move on and read further into the Cosmere. So that's it. I really ended up enjoying this. I'm not sure it has made me a Sanderson superfan, but I think that I can appreciate certain parts of his writing while also wondering if maybe some of the things that I didn't like so much are going to either improve in future books or I'm not going to care about them because the things that he does well are going to completely blow me away. I have heard, just from my very small sampling of people on Discord, mixed reactions to book 2. Some people say it's their favorite of the series. Some people say that they did not enjoy it at all. But I am looking forward to reading it myself, being able to form my own opinions. I don't know how useful this review was because, like I said, so many people have reviewed Mistborn. Everybody has read it. Thankfully, I am now not the only booktuber alive who has not read it. But I am looking forward to being able to read more, and I will see you with another video soon. Bye!